Grateful to you, Arjun, for your kind words and to the Azim Premji University for its invitation. Who leads India? Now, traveling in the princely state of Mysore in 1927, the very inquisitive Gandhi asked some poor villagers, who rules Mysore? Now, I don't know why he asked that question. I think it was just inquisitiveness. Who rules Mysore? And the reply he got was, some god rules Mysore. The villagers did not say, Maharaja Krishnaraja Wadiyar IV rules Mysore. They did not say, Diwan Sir Mirza Ismail rules Mysore. They did not say, Sir Moksha Gundam Vishweshwaraya. In other words, not the Rajarshi, not the Rajamantri, not the Rajaguru, but some god rules us. Girish Karnad, whom I checked with, said they must have said in Kannada something like, or what they would have said in Tamil, Yedo oru devate. So here apparently, according to Girish, they must have said, oru devuru. So recording the reply in his famous article in Harijan on God, Gandhi then went on to write, even in ordinary affairs, we know that people do not know who rules or why and how he rules, and yet they know that there is a power that certainly rules. Now, 9 decades on, if any villager in India or even in a town or city dweller were to be asked who rules India or who leads India, one could well get the same dry and despondent reply, or the even more laconic, Bhagwan Jane. Has anyone ever led India, or the great area that we now call India? Ashoka tried to, else he would not have expressed remorse for what he did to Kalinga in Kandahar and here in Karnataka, which incidentally among the states of the Union has the largest cluster of Ashoka's edicts. Ashoka assumed, we may assume, that the people around the Kaveri knew their Magadhi Brahmi. Akbar tried to lead India. Dara Shukro would have loved to lead India. In more recent times, Vivekananda certainly captured the imagination of Indians comprehensively, way beyond his natural constituency in Bengal, from Amarnath to Kanyakumari. Gandhi did so too, quite miraculously, using 2 agencies of British India that he did not boycott, and in fact used prodigiously, even prodigally, British India's railways and the Raja's very reliable postal system, which delivered dak to him scrupulously, even when addressed to Mahatma Gandhi somewhere in India. And 3 Indians, long after their deaths, have remained all India icons, leadership icons, their pictures and statues dotting the entire nation, not because of official or family promotion, but national ardor. Shahid Bhagat Singh, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and Baba Saheb Ambedkar. Now all this is about the past. Can anyone lead India that is Bharat today? Not just a slice of its landmass, as many naturally and instinctively do, or one section of its heart, as some try mischievously to do, or a wedge of its mind, as even fewer, braver beings called public intellectuals dare to do. Not those segments of India or of Indians, but the whole of India. Can anyone lead India? Can anyone possibly think of leading a country as large, as diverse, as complex as India? I will reflect on this question through what may seem like a forest of names, but also, hopefully, a small grove of thoughts that are not about people, but processes. In terms of physical size, India is huge, all of 3-something million kilometers, not counting the territorial sea over which its sovereignty extends, or that large swathe in Antarctica, where India has its environmentally audacious station, Maitri. In fact, huge is not the word. India is gigantic. There are only 6 countries that are larger than India: Russia, Canada, China, the USA, Brazil, and Australia. Size-wise, globally, India is the 7th largest, a high ranking, given that the world has 195 countries. Yet, size is only one denominator of identity and not the most important. The countries larger than India do not, I submit, have what India has as an identity marker in addition to its size, which is complexity. That combination, rendered all the more challenging by the democratic nature of our polity, makes India not easy to lead. This complexity lies basically in two problems. First, the unevenness, vertical and horizontal, of our terrain, which made an enchanted Jahangir exclaim when he saw Kashmir, Garche Firdaus Zaminast, as you all know, Haminasto, Haminasto, Haminast. And a dour Aurangzeb, when first shunted out to what in today's administrative parlance would be called a punishment posting, to the dry and dusty Deccan, Ya Khuda. Now, second, identity fractionalization, a polite phrase for what is a chronically and intrinsically fractured condition. We can call it variety, we can call it diversity, plurality. Those descriptions too are polite, optimistic expressions made by us, for us, to persuade ourselves that separate and distinct we may be, but we are all right, really, we are all right, and we are together. But are we in truth all right, and are we really together? I believe we are what Tagore said we should not be, broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, which is why we need to be led to face these walls, face their truth, if we are to make them less forbidding, or even better, to bring them down. We've all known Robert Frost's poem, Fire and Ice. Some say the world, I don't have to repeat it. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I have tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that ice is also great and would suffice. Now, I need to write this down to recite it. I can't remember it. But Dr. Karan Singh remembers it completely. As they say, he has by-hearted it. Now, Dr. Karan Singh tried to lead Kashmir. His father did. But we know what happened. Ice suffices. Our narrow walls are made of fire and of hate, the fires of aspiration and the ice of competition. I have a name for one of these walls, patriotism. These walls stand principally, as I said, on land. They are about land, about ownership and belonging. It is not just that India is about many, many kinds of land types, but that India's dharti is almost every single day in the grip of some crisis of one kind or the other, and not an ordinary crisis, but a life and death crisis. Mostly natural, but often man-assisted, like the floods that drowned Chennai 2 years ago. These crises distance people from what should be theirs. They maroon and coral them into isolation. If one region is drenched to the bone in a flood, another reels under a pitiless, sunless drought. If one part is fighting a forest fire, another is scrambling out of an earthquake. Land-related catastrophes paralyze life in India. They mock at man's assumption of the leadership of man. They mock, I just said, leadership assumptions. But truth to tell, more truthfully, they also galvanize land-related leadership. It was a land-based, cultivation-based human crisis that first catapulted Gandhi into a leadership role in India, Champaran, in 1917. It was another drought-based crisis that turned Vallabhbhai Patel into Sardar Patel, Bardoli, in 1928. Babu Rajendra Prasad's work for the relief of victims of the Bihar earthquake in 1934 more than matched that of the British Raj and set a paradigm for voluntary action in natural disaster theaters. The Tibhaga movement in Bengal in 1946 became a mass struggle, bringing the Kisan Sabha and thereby peasant mobilization to national limelight. Jayaprakash Narayan's volunteer action for the victims of the Bihar famine of 1966-67 did the same, leading the then Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi, and his future bête noire, fresh in her office then, to entrust the entire Bihar drought relief arrangement to Jayaprakash Narayan, both governmental and non-governmental. A tribute to his genius for administration, for organization, which he was not credited by. This again is about the past. What of land crises today? The land crises of today are pervasive, pernicious, and they come at a time when the country as a whole is also experiencing an endemic debilitation. The steady degradation and loss of topsoil accompanied by plummeting groundwater levels. This makes such land as is available for habitation, for cultivation, vulnerable, precarious, and precious. It makes life on it insecure. It encourages land villainy. Now look at the phrases associated with land now. Land grabber, land shark, land mafia. These are the human equivalents of droughts and floods and earthquakes. But today's land crisis does something else as well. And this is what can be called a positive. It calls for, enables, and creates leaders of land causes, just like the pre-independence land crisis did. Think of just 3 recent examples. Vinoba Bhave's Bhudan, Kerala's Bhumi Samaram, the Micha Bhumi Samaram, the struggle for surplus lands redistribution in Kerala, and the most recent movement in Gujarat led by Jignesh Mewani for land justice. But lest one imagines that land causes are only met by political figures or public figures, I must say that for me the first land-related or land-created or land-linked leadership came not from EPW or Frontline, but a film, a couple of films in fact. Balraj Sahni and Nirupa Roy in Do Bigha Zameen, 1953, made me see land scarcity sharply. Nirupa Roy in that film, bless her Bollywood life, anticipated the great land leaders of our time, Medha Patkar and Aruna Roy. And that film, DBZ as we may call it, gave us in the role played by Ratan Kumar, the character of the child hero, Kanhaiya. The DBZ Kanhaiya faded away in a way we must hope JNU's Kanhaiya never will. Nargis, bless her, in Mother India, 1957, made land causes come alive in a way that is unsurpassed. Nirupa and Nargis are, for me, leaders in the world of land distress, paving the way for, in our times, the narrative given by the incomparable Palagummi Sainath. Independent India's revolutionary abolition of zamindari, captured brilliantly in Vikram Seth's novel A Suitable Boy, found fulfillment in West Bengal's Operation Barga. It has its own heroes, both political and Kisan in origin. But I must mention the leadership provided to land reforms by a civil servant, P.S. Appu, who was to Nehru-led land reforms what V.P. Menon was to the Patel-led integration of the states. Another unknown leader of land-based reforms was Ganapathiya Pillai, a Madras civil servant whose report on the Pannayyal of Tanjore is a classic which, like classical music, as T.M. Krishna keeps telling us, only Mylapore and Ramavaram Brahmins claim to understand. But land reforms are remembered in reports, even if brilliantly written, such as Appu's and Pillai's, that nobody reads, while land integrations are remembered by memoirs unbrilliantly written, such as V.P. Menon's, that no one stops reading. Today's premium on land, its abduction by monopoly, its mutation by techno-commerce, its fragmentation, and its debasement are at the root of the crisis of crises facing India, our agrarian crisis. The Nakshal and Maoist movements emanate from the same hinterland of dispossession. You have to read Sainath's Everyone Loves a Good Drought, or the 5-volume report of the Farmers' Commission chaired by Professor Swaminathan to get a sense of the crisis's ramifications. Aruna Roy's Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, Jean Drèze's relentless writings about who Ram Guha recently reminded us so importantly, in tandem with Amartya Sen, and independently also of the Nobel laureate, have all led the nation's awareness of our sharded pummeled, disemboweled earth and the farmers working on it. They have shown us what leading India means. The Prime Minister of India today, and has been, I think, since the first Prime Minister of India, the first and foremost minister in charge of challenge management and complexity management and disaster management. He is mandated to lead the struggle here. But the persons I mentioned, Swaminathan, Sen, Sainath, Patkar, Roy, Drez, and young Mewani, are in fact leading the struggle for the protection of our land's integrity. Our farmers, if asked today who leads your cause, may or may not cite these names, but somewhere inside them, they know that there are leaders out there who are there for them. Hundreds of livestock owners will, on being asked to name their leader and their savior or their Uddharaka, say at once, "Vi Kurian." Thousands of mountain-dwelling pastorals will cite at once the tree savers, our Himalaya Ashiks, Chandi Prasad Bhatt and Sundarlal Bahuguna. They will not say, "some God." India in 2018 is not the India of 1927. We do have our leaders, transformational ones, though they may not make headlines. Now, like the warp in a fabric's weft, the story of our railways is inextricably woven into that of our land, our history. I spoke of DBZ's Ratan Kumar and his fading away. Now, so he has, but not before showcasing the Indian leadership by means of the railways, our railways. In the film Jagriti, 1954, which somebody of my generation here will remember, the theme song sung was by a group of kids on a school trip across India. I'm not a singer, but I'll give you this line as it is sung. आओ बच्चों तुम्हें दिखाएं झांकी हिंदुस्तान की, इस मिट्टी से तिलक करो ये धरती है बलिदान की, वंदे मातरम. All of them sing Vande Mataram as the train zigzags. Now, the train goes, to use a phrase of Frederick Burrows, the British Labour Party appointee governor of Bengal and himself a railwayman, the train goes shunting and hooting along the nation's great heritage spots, gloriously and glorifyingly, extolling our greats like Rana Pratap, Shivaji, the martyrs of Jallianwala Bagh. That Jagriti song gives one goosebumps. But there is a twist to the tale. Ratan Kumar, 9-10-year-old roly-poly Ratan Kumar of DBZ, whose real life name was Syed Nazir Ali, left for Pakistan shortly thereafter and was promptly starred in a copycat film called Bedari, made in Pakistan, with the theme song in the same tune rendered as आओ बच्चों सैर कराएं तुमको पाकिस्तान की, जिसके खातिर की कुर्बानी लाखों ने जान की. Pakistan's leadership. Leadership, like cinema, has its originals and it has its dupes. To return to India's great railways, it is not just because the railways have a romantic association with the freedom struggle, like Gandhi's iconic rail journeys, Aurobindo's, Bhagat Singh's, V.V.S. Iyer's, Subhash Bose's great escapes via the railways, the Kakori heist. It is not just because heroism has been propelled on our rolling stock, but because the railways in their growth have been the site of their own heroism themselves. They mark in many ways a leadership role in the modernization of India, in what Arjun referred to as perhaps the retrieval by the public of its own destinies. Their moving away from steam means moving away from pollution. Their moving away from wooden sleepers to concrete means moving away from forest decimation to conservation. These are changes that have to be welcomed. Who and what has led this change in Indian railways? Now, innovation has, technology has, policy making has, but leadership also has. And who leads the Indian railways? some remarkable railwaymen do namelessly, facelessly. And we have, of course, the one and only E. Sridharan. But one name I must mention here is that of Lal Bahadur Shastri, who, as Nehru's railway minister, introduced the first chair car train. Placing trains on par with planes was a gigantic leap in travel. But Shastri, as rail minister, showed another kind of leadership as well. Because if leadership is about inspiring incumbency, it is also about inspiring relinquishing. Shastri's resignation after the Ariyalur rail accident in 1956 was an act of moral self-accountability. It stands tall. Another, not to be forgotten relinquishing, is that of V.V. Giri, who quit Nehru's cabinet as Labour minister over the right to strike. Giri, we should know, had founded the Bengal Nagpur Railway Association for the welfare of railway workers and was president of the All India Railway Workers Federation. That was an act of ideological responsibility, and that too stands tall. But I have to mention here another rare example of unacclaimed leadership, railway leadership. Morarji Desai's railway minister, Madhu Dandavate, revolutionized rail travel for the not-so-rich, for the poor. Now, foam is not a complimentary word. It is used to denote in oratory, like what you are now being subjected to, meant to denote bakwas. But you would revise your concept of foam when on Googling Madhu Dandavate, you find he initiated an improvement in second-class railway travel for passengers by replacing the wooden berths with berths consisting 2 inches of foam. Now, those in my age group will know what 2 inches of foam can do to a person traveling in the railways. And that is not all. To how many railway ministers is it given to say while presenting the railway budget, Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to present to the House a budget which will contain an improvement in the working conditions of licensed porters and vendors by making them eligible for certain facilities, such as medical facilities. Today, when that great innovation of the upwardly mobile class, namely the wheeled stroller luggage, has all but extinguished the porter, and the railway budget has been swallowed by the union budget, I salute that quiet leader of change and conservation in the railways, the socialist Madhu Dandavate. These men have led India's railways. They have led it to lead India. But so do another category of men and women whose names we do not know and never can. These are those who clean the surfaces of the muck we users of railways leave on it and throw from it. Manual scavenging's most striking example is held by the railways to its embarrassment and our collective shame. Bezwada Wilson is, for me, a leader beyond leaders. Truth to power is now a well-known but worn-out phrase. Wilson tells truth to something more than powerful, something more than those in power, something which is more obdurate, more deaf than leaders, namely to us, to you and to me. A recent down-to-earth survey, incidentally, a journal which in itself is a leader of change and a leader of change of perspectives, has not taken away from Anil Agarwal's influence, the impact of down-to-earth. A down-to-earth survey tells us, extrapolating a sample survey, that the daily waste from our railways is, we have just used them, paper cups, 14,73,500. 14,73,500 paper cups from rails alone every day. Paper containers, 9,26,000. Mineral water bottles, 84,000. Water pouches, 5,89,400 every day flung out of our railways. Who clears this for India? is a clear leader of India. Whoever thinks of a way in which clearing this would not offend Mother Earth nor befool innocents will be a millennial leader of India. Swachh Bharat is essentially a great concept, but it is headless, leaderless, and soulless. Building toilets is easy. All that it takes is money. Printing notes is easy. But giving India a sense of what garbage is, what excrement is, where it goes, how it goes, what happens to the place where it goes, what it does to the men who get it going, how sweeping it out of sight is not the answer, how each of us must be responsible directly or indirectly for the waste we generate, is a different story. What does telling that story make that story? Ask Gandhi. Today, telling that story takes one thing over all else. It takes saying to India's greatest ecological threat, plastic, behave yourself. Plastic, behave yourself. We need rubber, we need plastic in several departments of life, irreplaceably, such as on railway berths, 2 inches of foam, in medical accessories, and very importantly, in condoms. The pile of plastic and the sachet which holds gutka and 1,000 other fast foods and PET bottles over India's landscape, seascape, and mindscape keeps rising because plastic is king. Plastics are not a monopoly in India. They are a monarchy, and we are its subjects. We have abolished privy purses, but plastics are another story. For that monarchy to end, for non-degradable plastic to go, we need a non-degradable plastic policy and a non-degradable and a very non-plastic will. If rupees 100, rupees 1,000, rupees 500 can be banished overnight, why cannot plastics of a certain gauge, a certain grade, be asked to just get lost? The leader who says that to plastic has not yet risen, but sure will. Sardar Patel would have restricted plastic use in a matter of days. The leader who makes plastics her or his obsession, for only an obsessive cleaner up of plastics will work. Curbing not just the sale of plastic bags, but their manufacture, turning off the tap and not mopping the floor has not yet arisen, but she or he sure will. One area where today's India has found leaders, world-class leaders, true leaders in the sense all true leaders are true, namely to themselves, is in the field of what is loosely called environment. And these are not necessarily jholawalas. They are simply regular people. One such, as I learned recently while working for a discussion with a group of Fulbright scholars from America, one such, a Marxist legislator in Madhya Pradesh, decades ago, opposed the setting up of the Union Carbide plant in Bhopal and was shouted down then as being anti-US and communist. Today, if someone objects to or even expresses reservations about an industrial undertaking on environmental grounds, is likely to be dubbed anti-national and seditious. Environment and nature conservation issues pose the greatest challenge to the concept of leadership in India, because that is an area where the cause is critical but has no popular resonance. It does not link to people. It is vital, but does not touch a mass chord. Environmental protection requires populations to give up something, not get something. And elections are about getting people things, from freebies to free fertilizers and free bijli. Paryavaran, as politicians know, lacks popular connect. India, by popular acclaim, will throw up a Lokamanya, Lokanayak, a Lokapriya. It will anoint a Deshabandhu, as in Chittaranjan Das, a Deshabhakta, as in Karnad Sadashivarao, but it will never, ever name someone, not in a closed room meeting like this, but in a mass gathering. Bhumi Nayak, Nadi Sevak, Giri Rakshak, doubtful. Democracy frees people from slavery. It cages nature in progress. It gives the voter choice. it extinguishes choice in nature. The leader who goes beyond the popular, goes beyond popularity itself, and is crucified on the beams of truth and courage will come in India, the land that produced the Buddha. But how much more will be lost, squandered, and endangered before that happens? Ah, Devaru. We, the people, are quick to learn, to fight when the fight is against another. We are slow learners when the fight is against ourselves. In one area, though, we have shown self-regulation, perhaps because the benefits are immediate. Tarzi Vitachi, the veteran Sri Lankan journalist, was taunted once by a New York cab driver. So many of you have been in or from New York. Taking Vitachi for an Indian, the New York taxi driver asked, "So you were from the country where they breed like pigs, right?" Now, no Lankan, and many of you know Lanka very well, no Lankan would like to be mistaken for an Indian under any circumstance. And normally, Vitachi would have liked to say, "Do you mean India?" "Certainly not. I'm not from India." And then perhaps under his breath mutter, "Thank God." But the cab driver's jibe was a racist jibe, aimed at a South Asian. And Vitachi replied with all the dignity that could be commanded by a South Asian, and he replied for India. "No," he said, "I'm not from where they breed like pigs, but from where they do not die like flies anymore." India's rising life expectancy at birth must have been totally beyond the cab driver's ken. But the point needed to be made then and needs to be remembered now here. At that point, Vitachi was a leader, an Indian leader. Speaking up for India to a prejudiced world is about Indian leadership. And I want to mention here two other non-Indians who have helped India. The first unwittingly, and the second more directly and honestly. Catherine Mayo's book, Mother India, gave dramatic accounts of the India of the time: child marriage, premature motherhood, postpartum hemorrhage, and death. A truth told with bad intent, William Blake has said, is worse than all the lies you can invent. Now, she told these truths definitely with bad intent. She hated India. She also hated the Philippines. Why? Because the Philippines was Catholic, and she believed that the US should be white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. She hated India. Gandhi described the work very sharply, Mother India, as a drain inspector's report. But he also said, and that is what made Gandhi the Gandhi that we know. He also said, but the drains are there. The book, Mother India, was meant to and did indeed warp American and Western perceptions of India's credentials to freedom. But then Catherine Mayo, I won't say bless her soul, Catherine Mayo did something else as well. She studied India to denounce India, but her studied denunciation of India played a role in the lawmaker Harbilas Sarda introduced a bill in the British Indian legislature which was passed 2 years later as the Child Marriage Restraint Act. Now, Andre Bete has told me, and I'm sure many of you believe this even without someone like Bete telling you, that one of the greatest accomplishments of India is the rise in the age of the girl's marriage. The rise in the age of consent of the Indian girl's average at marriage, conception, and motherhood is a great accomplishment. Catherine Mayo's perverse half-truths have to be half-thanked. And for me, partly due to Mayo, Harbilas Sarda is an all-time leader of India. Margaret Sanger, the renowned exponent of birth control and feminist sexuality, visited India more than once and discussed the subject in 1935 with Gandhi, who agreed that birth control was necessary, but suggested that self-control was the answer. Now, Imagine the discussion between Margaret Sanger and Gandhi. Margaret says birth control. Gandhi says self-control. Margaret Sanger gulps and says, Mr. Gandhi, try tell that to the men in India. Sanger understood the psychology of Indian husbands rather more practically than her great Indian interlocutor. But insofar as birth rates have dropped in India due to an intensified state-led movement for family limitation, Margaret Sanger is to be regarded as a leader of India's family planning program. As India's population grows, it grows more mindful of its identities. The Indian National Congress knew from its early days that India teems with identity politics. It knew that well. Years before the reorganization of states on linguistic lines, it formed Pradesh Congress committees on the basis of language areas. Its working committee had an eclectic character to it. Regions, languages, religions, castes were represented to it, caste with the greatest difficulty. But for the matter of fact, the Congress presidency itself revolved in a way that regional aspirations were met. This ensured freshness. Gandhi himself held that office, not often realized. Gandhi himself held the office of Congress president only once, and only for 1 year, in 1924. There was a logic, if a contested logic, to that identity-respecting formula. After independence, the Congress did not alternate its Congress presidency quite that regularly, Nehru holding it for a fairly long period. He led India comprehensively, almost compulsively. Struggle creates great heroes, and heroes incidentally make good statues. But it is difficult for statues after the day they've been unveiled to look heroic. They begin to look sorry. R.K. Lakshman had a great cartoon in 2 frames of Nehru. The first has Nehru smiling, a fresh rose blooming on his buttonhole. This is in the 1950s, standing proudly on a pedestal that says 5-year plan, Panchashila, etc. The second frame from the 60s has not Nehru standing on the pedestal, but the pedestal standing on Nehru's head. The good man sweating away under the burden of his 5-year plan, Panchashila. The rose is also sweating. A Democrat of Democrats that he was, he did manage as Prime Minister to overwhelm India. Ambedkar was certainly sidelined. Sharing privation is not difficult. Sharing power is very difficult. As minister, Ambedkar was made to feel he was there on sufferance, that he had overstayed his welcome in the government. And he did the only self-respecting thing that he could have done when on the matter of the Hindu Code Bill, he resigned his ministerial office. The Congress let him go without resistance. And 1,000 pities, it opposed him in the first election that Ambedkar ever fought in North Bombay in 1952. Congress was Congress, and it was able to defeat Dr. Ambedkar. And if this was not bad enough, in the by-election that arose in 1954 in Bhandara, the Congress again opposed and defeated him. Congress should not only not have let Dr. Ambedkar leave the ministry, it should have offered to him in 1952 the newly created office of the Vice President of India. There was a felicity to the President of the Constituent Assembly, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, becoming the first President of India. But should not the chairman of the drafting committee, described on all hands as the architect of the Constitution, have become our first Vice President? Dr. Ambedkar's inauguration of the position of Uparashtrapati would have made a huge difference to the spirit and the pace of social justice and of affirmation and of affirmative action in India. It would have made a huge difference to leadership in India. But today, all leaders queue to not just hail, but almost to worship Baba Saheb. He would be amused. Exploitation of the charisma of the great dead is a national political pastime with us. Baba Saheb's name has become a kamadhenu, which all manner of self-promoters seek to milk. Those he would have chased away from his presence with a single withering look, come up to his portraits bearing garlands and wearing smiles with what can only be called gall. some of these belong unbelievably to the right. There is, of course, just one compelling reason why they queue up to honor him. It is not love of the great man as much as love of the great electoral dividends which identification with that icon can bring. For those who want to lead India, the shoulders of the great are a great help. For one thing, they are broad. For another, they are strong. But best of all, they cannot shrug off those who squirrel onto them. Periyar, EVR, and Sheikh Abdullah have also had the same, one might call, good luck. They were a thorn when they were alive. They are all roses and roses now. But to take a quick look at identity politics' great names in India, Potti Sriramulu's advocacy of a separate Andhra, Master Tara Singh's of Punjabi Suba, Fizo's movement in Nagaland, Lal Denga's for the Mizo, and as I have gathered from Ramachandra Guha, that of Jaipal Singh Munda for Chota Nagpur's tribes, gave examples of unparalleled identity leadership. They were leaders of their own people, but as a collectivity, they are leaders of what may be called India's federal spirit, of India's public spirit, harbingers of India's republicanism. If our regions have had their aspirations and those aspirations have found their leaders, a contrary and sobering reaction has occurred at the national level. Anyone who echoed or looked empathetically at Periyar's or the Sher-e-Kashmir's or Fizo's aspirations had the IB's eyes and ears trained on him and her. Jayaprakash Narayan's call to India to hearken to the Kashmiris' demand for autonomy, or to that of Fizo and Mridula Sarabhai's or Rajaji's as well, was promptly dubbed anti-national. It was left to the leaderly, that's the only word I have for it, it was left to the leaderly wisdom of the then Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri. So the story goes. And I believe that story to be true. To tell the then Chief Minister of Madras, who rushed to the Prime Minister saying, you have to proceed against Rajaji. He has been saying very good things about Sheikh Abdullah. Unbelievable. Sheikh Abdullah, how can you say good things about Sheikh Abdullah? Rajaji has been doing it. He has to be proceeded against. Lal Bahadur Shastri, in his soft manner, said to the Chief Minister, you have heard, have you not, of Bertrand Russell? And that was that. I do not know if the then Chief Minister, and it was not Kamaraj, had heard of Bertrand Russell or not, but the point was made. Nehru, as I said, was a Democrat of Democrats. But those of my generation will recall that by the late 50s and early 60s, a certain irreplaceability or an aura of irreplaceability, and therefore of a certain unquestionability, had begun to surround Nehru's establishment, not like an aura, but like a gas plume. State control over the commanding heights of the economy was a coin of which the other side, obverse or converse, I can never remember which, meant Congress control over the commanding peaks of the polity. Seeing that, and seeing too Nehru's conditioned empathy for the Soviet Union and his implicit trust in Krishna Menon and P.C. Mahalanobis, two Indian leaders raised their voice, one from the right, the other from the left. From the right, Rajaji and the Swatantra Party. From the left, Jayaprakash Narayan and his scattered volunteer groups. Nehru reacted to both with courteous disdain. But the country, showing signs of unease with incumbency, rather like a knee cramp or a hip creak rather than a fracture, encouraged the dissenters, electorally in the case of Rajaji's Swatantra, and morally in the case of JP, especially when he spoke up against Nehru's soft peddling of the Soviet invasion of Hungary and China's havoc in Tibet. The respect given to Rajaji and JP scrubbed open the pores on democracy's skin and kept it from becoming a thick hide. More, that national endorsement of dissent in the Nehru years showed that democracy is about thinking, speaking, writing, organizing, and breathing free. It prepared the ground for the nation's opposition to the emergency of 1975-77. Then it prepared the country for the challenge that led Vishwanath Pratap Singh to do all that he did against the Congress government led by Rajiv Gandhi in 1989, and to the Lokpal movement initiated by Anna Hazare in our more recent times. But one has to be fair. Let it be noted that RSS and the Janasangh stood on the side of democracy during those years. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Lal Krishna Advani were jailed during the emergency. They had backed JP's movement to the hilt. And Nanaji Deshmukh, foremost among them. And here I would like to do a straight lift from Wikipedia. In the latter half of the year 1974, a massive procession led by Jayaprakash Narayan was taken out in Patna. As the procession wended its way through the roads of the state capital, the police made a lathi charge. Let us remember, the Congress police leading a lathi charge on Jayaprakash Narayan. And it is said the Sarvodaya leader was the target. The final assault came when Narayan's supporters were escorting him to safety. One of the supporters sprang to his leader's protection, covered him and took all the lathi's blows on himself. That man was Nanaji Deshmukh. Unquote. Let that be noted with appreciation and with respect. But let the RSS and the Janasangh's successor organization today note something also. Political veracity is not a one-time, lifetime passport. It needs to be renewed every now and then in the office of the RPO, meaning respecting public opinion. Not majority opinion, not electoral opinion, but public opinion. I would say that today, if a leader from the NDA or the RSS were to do that for a democratic dissenter, that day, that moment would be a golden moment. Leadership in development, in progress, in pragati, sounds like the caption of an article in Yojana. But I must mention that vital branch briefly. Kamaraj, in my mind, symbolizes, personifies that kind of leadership for one thing he did above all, the midday meal scheme for school children. Others followed, improved upon that model, but it is to that son of Virudhunagar that credit belongs for putting nutrition at the heart of education, making both together the soul of development. And that brings me to the subject of food itself. What Prime Minister Indira Gandhi thought of US President Lyndon Johnson, only Indira Gandhi knows. But with a crippling drought denting food availability, she sought in 1966 Lyndon Johnson's help to meet the crisis. It is said Lyndon Johnson was struck by Indira Gandhi. But before she arrived in Washington, Lyndon Johnson asked the Indian ambassador B.K. Nehru, "How shall I address your Prime Minister?" Now, B.K. Nehru knew that Indira Gandhi may not like the American immediate first name basis. So he asked Indira Gandhi, Lyndon Johnson wants to know how he should address you. She said, "Tell him most of my cabinet calls me sir." Leadership. Lyndon Johnson responded to Indira Gandhi's request for food reflexively, quickly. But he also laid down conditions and attitudes which were deeply embarrassing and even humiliating. As you all know, PL 480 shipments became a synonym for dependence. But they made Indira Gandhi call for and achieve, as a response to this, something which has brought leadership to a new level altogether. I'm very parochial. Two Tamilians, C. Subramaniam and M.S. Swaminathan, came to the defense of India. C. Subramaniam has got the Bharat Ratna. Norman Borlaug, who brought the transformationally phenomenal dwarf wheat, quadrupling our product, got the Nobel Peace Prize. Swaminathan is yet to get the Bharat Ratna. That highest Indian award or recognition or decoration has eluded Swaminathan, which is a signal loss for that decoration. But the non-Agenarian works tirelessly even today as an emeritus inspiration through the M.S. Swaminathan Foundation in Chennai. In any great building, The balconies gleam, the foundations lie buried. But the leadership is with the foundations. Another technological leader of India is Sam Pitroda, not just for making communications a matter of common holding, but for empowering women by placing in their hands the mobile telephone. He has created what can only be called a revolution, and he has done that through what can only be called leadership. And if I do not bring into my discussion today the pioneering founders and leaders of Wipro and Infosys, blame the location of this talk, please, and blame my personal respect for them. But where is the doubt that Bangalore will rank high and wide like the Vidhana Saudha in the nation's mindscape for what its IT pioneers have done to propel India into the modern age, not as a latecomer, but as a pace setter. India teams after its now better fed and better networked population with another teeming, shall we call it teeming thing, religious variety. It is also passionately religious within that variety. A Gallup poll, I was absolutely blown by this discovery. A Gallup poll was conducted in 2009 across the world, which asked, is religion important in your daily life? If I was asked this question, is religion important in my daily life? I would just say I do not know, because I do not know what religion means. I have a sense of faith. I do not have any doubt that God exists some moments. And I really despair and I wonder if God could have ever existed the very next moment. So I don't really know. But does religion play a part in my life? You will be surprised. 90% of the Indian sample said yes. 93% of the Pakistan sample said yes. 99 plus of the Bangladesh sample said yes. No wonder India was so passionately partitioned. Imagine 90% of all religious groups in a country saying religion is important to them. Religious festivals, Diwali, Dasara, Muharram, Eid, a source of great joy to people, are a source of nervous anxiety to the administration. Hindu processions around Muslim places of worship, Muslim processions around Hindu places of worship are about walking on a kshurasya dhara, the razor's edge, and that edge is some edge. Add to old festival processions new frenzies like Rath Yatras, religious flags being planted in others' premises, pig meat in Eidgahs, cows' carcasses near temple locations, relocations of dargahs and shrines, and the administration, neutral as it is expected to be, has to be more than stoic. It has to be heroic, and it has to lead. We have had, over the decades, examples of administrators in riot situations being stoic and heroic, like soldiers in battle. And more often than not, they are not given the example they need by their political leaders. In the matter of riots, Gandhi's miracle in Calcutta in 1947, as we know, won for him the then Governor General of India's salute that has gone into history. Nehru led riot policing personally in Delhi. That too made history. But the story of political leadership in riots subsequently has been unheroic, has been sad, has been tragic. And let me just add here that Mamata Banerjee, as an opposition leader then, played no small part in keeping the Sikh population of Kolkata completely unharmed in 1984. Polarization is the dangerous tool that India has known to have divided it physically in the past and threatens to divide it psychologically now. Short-termism being the political mentality now, polarization is the short-wick, short-term, short-sighted, dangerous cracker in the hands of India's juvenile politics. It can burn us third degree in the fire of rage and the ice of hate. In the matter of war, Nehru's 1962 example has been deeply problematic, his defense minister Krishna Menon being blamed by chroniclers for the debacle. R. Venkatraman, a later defense minister himself and also as a later president of India, one in whom the supreme command of our armed forces vested, believed that Krishna Menon was not to be blamed for what was an inherited slack in preparedness, and that Menon, in fact, vigorously rectified that slack through indigenizing defense production, something which made the 1965 victory possible. RV maintained that the fruits of this rectification had not begun to come in by 1962, and that Shastri's example and Indira Gandhi's later in 71 have something to do, much to do, with Krishna Menon's indigenization. I would like to think RV is right. But the example of peacetime and peacemaking leadership in India has been no less critical, no less valuable. Nehru's working towards the Indus Waters Treaty with Pakistan in 1960, Shastri's Tashkent Treaty with Pakistan in 66, Indira Gandhi's Shimla Agreement with Bhutto showed statesmanship, far-sightedness, and a lack of pettiness. They also showed the example of courage, for waging peace does not win popularity. In fact, it wins controversy. Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee's leadership example in the Lahore Declaration of 1999 and in his memorable speech in Lahore following that has to be regarded as far more memorable than whatever the Kargil war in which so many brave hearts laid down their lives may have achieved for India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's initial attempts at securing an equation with Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif were also a leadership example, and if reciprocated, would have brought India a certain increment on the leadership stage. These are examples of the opposite of short-termism, and we must be thankful for them. 3 C's marked leadership in the era of our freedom struggle: character, commitment, and charisma. And there were 3 S's, all nouns, in each of these 3 C's: sacrifice in character, sincerity in commitment, and selflessness in charisma. 3 M's mark leadership today. Sorry, the 3 M's I have in mind do not mark leadership. They make leadership today. They have, in fact, replaced the human leadership of leadership. They are money, misinformation, and manipulation. And there are 3 S's, all adjectives in each M as well: secret in money transactions, sordid in misinformation, sinister in manipulation. So then, who leads India today? I would say, with the deepest regret, that the question has to get modified to what leads India. And the short answer to that is the short-termism leads India. Short goals, short methods, short tempers, shorter and ever shorter sessions of parliament leads India. Dirgham pashyatu ma hrasvam is what President Radhakrishnan enjoined us. Look far ahead, do not be myopic. We are doing the opposite. Hrasyam pashyatu ma dirgham. You will forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, for having taken a dirgham of dirgham speeches to come to that hrasvam of hrasma conclusion. I will fold up now with a somber thought. A leader of India has to be a leader of the whole of India and not bits and pieces of it. Because India is so large and so complex, and because it has people who are so varied and so greatly in need, the leader has to be a leader of the whole of India and of all Indians. That leader does not have to please the whole of India, nor does all of India have to endorse that leader, but that leader has to be trusted by all of India, trusted to have the right intention, the right method, the right instinct. That leader does not have to be a saint, only to be honest, neither scared nor scaring, neither fooled nor fooling. That leader has to know how to say, sorry, I was wrong, and sorry if I've hurt you. That leader has to be able to say with scorching honesty, I made a mistake. I meant to do well, but did wrong. I'm human, not superhuman. Forgive me. And that leader should be able to say goodbye to power with dignity, without resentment, saying the chance to serve India has to be deserved, not won. It has to be seen as a trust, not a victory. And when a leader will say that, not some god, not some Devaru, but the public of India will speak through him. I thank you.